coming to you from the mountains and the plains. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Altman.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance.
And now your hosts, Joe Altman and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire. Joe just got pulled into a meeting, so he's going to join us a little late. So we will welcome him on once he gets out of that meeting. But we're going to get right into this. Today's topic is H.R. 1. This is the bill that most people have actually requested that we cover. It's a bill that we've covered in the past under a different name, under a different title. Some of the things have changed. Some of the things are the same. So we're going to talk about it as best we can. It's a 700-plus page bill. So we're not going to be able to discuss everything in the 1-2 hours. But we're going to try and dive into the biggest parts of it that we can. Now, to do so, we're going to have to thread the tiniest needle, right? We're going to have to thread the eye of the tiniest little needle because we are not allowed under Facebook or YouTube's terms of service to discuss what we think happened in the 2020 election. We can't talk about that. But this episode is not about that. This episode is about H.R. 1, which is an attempt to take the legislative and regulatory changes that we've talked about in the past that were enacted in the 2020 election and make them permanent and make them nationwide. So basically, taking all of the conditions that led to this outcome in 2020 and making it permanent and making it nationwide. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try and thread that needle and not discuss the 2020 election. If you want to hear our thoughts on the 2020 election, there are plenty of videos on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble from the past 2 months where we've done a deep dive and basically told you everything we think. But today we have to look forward, and we're going to try and cover this topic without violating the terms of service in the process. So as we get into that, I want to just address that in the past 24 hours, I've gotten more hate mail than I think I've ever gotten on this show in the past. And it's hate mail. It wasn't really, maybe a handful of people emailing in, asking for me to be fired, asking for me to step down, asking for me to resign. One person said that I should just be relegated to research status because yesterday I was not willing to change the topic of the show 30 minutes in and just discuss a whole host of issues that any one of them would have gotten us kicked off of YouTube and Facebook and probably other platforms as well. So I want to make sure everyone understands. No, it's not cowardice, which a lot of people accused me of being a coward yesterday for not willing to just destroy the show. It's a focus on what this show has to be, what this show has to accomplish. Joe Biden is in office. However you feel he got there, fine. We have to stop him from enacting his agenda because it is a radical agenda. We covered last week, he put 52,000 Americans out of work. And the scrap that he gave the country were things like, the transgenders get to be in the military again. Right? We have to fight against these really important issues. And we cannot do that if we are deplatformed. Now, we are working on building a platform, but that takes time. It takes money. That doesn't happen overnight. Joe has said in the past, you can build Rome. You can't build Rome in a day, but you can certainly tear it down in a day. It does not serve us in this moment in time to get deplatformed because then we're talking to no one. I mean, we still talk to a few people, but we wouldn't talk to nearly as many people. And considering the fact that we're trying to go after Joe Biden for his administrative policies, this is a big deal, right? We have to stop this man from just completely destroying the country. And I'm just reminded, all the people who were emailing me saying that I should just flagrantly violate the rules, it reminds me of that scene from A Christmas Story where all the school children are telling the one kid to lick the flagpole because they want to see what happens. Well, they actually know what's going to happen. His tongue will get stuck. Everyone knows what happens if I start flagrantly violating Facebook and YouTube's rules. We'll get deplatformed. They just want to see it happen because they know that even if it happens, it's not going to happen to them. So I want to be absolutely clear. It's not cowardice. It's not cowardice why I'm not going to just openly talk about all the things we already talked about, again, now that the terms of service have changed. I'm just trying to keep my eye on the ball, right? And people telling me that I should get our whole organization deplatformed, otherwise I should lose my job. That's really two sides of the same coin, right? It's not a very good argument that I should force big tech companies to destroy our organization, otherwise I should lose my job. Yeah, no, I'm gonna take option C at that point. So I get it that we're all heated. I get it that we all want to make sure that we keep fighting, but we have to make sure we're here for the war. This is a war. Whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or anyone else in the line of succession, this is going to be 4 years of this. 4 years at least. 4 years of this. And the country is not made better if we cease to exist a week and a half into that 4-year term. So just wanted to clear that air. And if at any times you get mad because I'm telling Joe not to talk about a topic, Joe's very busy. Most days, I don't have a chance to talk to him before we go on air. I send him a brief outline, some cuts, some clips of what we want to talk about, but I don't get a chance really to talk about what he wants to talk about on air. So I want to make sure we protect the show, and I want to make sure that, yeah, we stay on topic, but protect the show and make sure that we don't get taken down because of an off-topic remark that's made on the side. So it's not a fight between me and Joe. It's not Joe has bravery, I have cowardice. It's much more complicated than that. But by all means, continue sending me hate mail. It made my day. So let's just dive into this. I've talked about that enough. Let's dive into this. This is H.R. 1. Mr. Producer, go ahead, put up my screen. H.R. 1 is a bill to expand Americans' access to the ballot box, reduce the influence of big money in politics, strengthen ethics rules for public servants, and implement other anti-corruption measures for the purpose of fortifying our democracy and for other purposes. The "and for other purposes" is always the most important part because that's when they try and sneak the nonsense in. They are presenting this as, the left is presenting this as the bill to save our democracy. That this is what needs to pass, otherwise there's no country anymore. The reality is, this bill is designed to make sure a Republican never wins again. And that's not talking about 2020, that's looking forward. If this bill passes, and many of the same kind of electoral, legislative, regulatory changes that we saw last year get sent nationwide and made permanent, a Republican will never win again, and we will see Democrats sweep into state, into Senate races, into House races that you never would have thought possible. So we're going to try and go through as much of this as we can. Not going to be able to go through all of it. Probably will overlook some of it. This is going to be something we're going to have to keep looking at because it's a big bill and they keep adding changes to it. But I want to dive in and talk about as much of it as we can. Again, our number 888-441-1121 if you want to call. If you call in, might keep you on hold for a little bit just to make sure that we finish whatever section of the bill that we're talking about. Also, a reminder, today's Fax Blast hasn't gone out yet, but we do have a Fax Blast on this issue, which I've linked in the description on Facebook and YouTube. So make sure you check that out as well, because this is a big issue, a big bill that we do not want to pass under any circumstances. So let's get into this. Everyone who likes when I just do a deep dive into legislation, this is the show for you, at least until Joe comes on. Mr. Producer, go to image number 0. Before we even dive in, I just want to make sure that I let you see, this is how the left is describing it. If we don't pass H.R. 1, we are effed as a nation. effed as a nation, except they didn't say effed. Let's jump to image number 1. Automatic registration of eligible individuals, requiring states to establish and operate automatic registration system. This is the idea that as soon as you become eligible to vote, you will automatically become registered to vote. Now, this looks really, really nice. This looks really like who wouldn't want every single person registered to vote? Well, it poses a serious risk. It poses a serious risk because if someone is registered to vote and they never vote and they have no intention of ever voting, it opens the door for someone else to potentially vote on their behalf. Very obvious. That's why states go through the process of purging the voter rolls of inactive voters to make sure that the bad actors don't take advantage of inactive voters to vote on their behalf illegally. Put that image back up again. The definition, the term automatic registration means a system that registers an individual to vote in elections for federal office in a state, if eligible, by electronically transferring the information necessary for registration from government agencies to election officials of the state, so that unless the individual affirmatively declines to be registered, the individual will be registered to vote in such election. So this is a big deal because obviously we know what happens if they do that. But it also violates many state laws. And there's a serious constitutional question about whether the federal government has the right to do this, because the Constitution gives the states the authority to run their own elections. So states have laws that say in order to be registered, you have to go forward and register. You have to actually make an effort to show that you care enough to wait in line at the DMV or use whatever process that state outlines. So yes, this is really, really bad in the sense that it would open the door for potentially fraudulent votes to be cast on behalf of inactive voters who never really wanted to vote and didn't even know they were registering. But it also would open up a constitutional crisis of having the federal government all of a sudden federalize what the Constitution says must be run by states. So automatic voter registration. Let's go to image number 2. They're also going to have same-day registration. No, that's not image number 2. Image number 2. There we go. Same-day registration. Same-day voter registration. So the system's going to automatically register you to vote, but apparently they're also going to let you register to vote same day. So the reason for that is they want people just to be able to show up at a polling place who the state has no idea if that person even exists, and allow them to register to vote, right? Because they're not talking about you coming of age at 18, getting your driver's license, automatically being registered to vote. They're talking about the situation that for a long time has been alleged in New Hampshire of people crossing the state line from Massachusetts, allegedly registering to vote in New Hampshire, allegedly, without ever actually becoming a resident of New Hampshire. Allegedly. See what I did there? That's long been a claim. So beyond just the automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration would be a mess. Let's put that image number 2 up again. Each state shall permit any individual on the day of a federal election and on any day when voting, including early voting, is permitted for a federal election, to register to vote in such election at the polling place using a form that meets the requirements under the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, and cast a vote in such election. So this is a big deal because if you register to vote the same day that you vote, it makes it impossible for a state to verify whether the registration is legitimate or not. Not that that necessarily happens, but there are cases where people fraudulently register to vote and they are kicked off the voter rolls before they are able to cast a ballot. This system would eliminate that option. Again, that's not something that many states put a lot of effort into, vetting each individual voter registration, but it wouldn't even be an option if this part of the legislation passed. So you have the automatic voter registration. You have the same day voter registration. Let's go to image number 3. Also going to have internet registration. So you don't even need to show up at the polling place or at the DMV or at whatever government office normally registers to vote. This is a part in the law to promote states to allow people to register over the internet. Now, why is that a problem? That's a problem because anything that uses the internet can be hacked. That doesn't necessarily mean it is hacked. That doesn't necessarily mean it will be hacked. But there is no such thing as a device that connects to the internet that cannot be hacked. It could take a very long time in the case of very, very secure networks and systems. But everything is hackable with enough time and with enough effort. Let's go back to that image number 3. Promoting internet registration. Requiring availability of internet for online registration. Each state acting through the chief state election official shall ensure that the following services are available to the public at any time on the official public websites of the appropriate state and local election officials in the state, in the same manner and subject to the same terms and conditions as the services provided by voter registration agencies under Section 7A. Online application for voter registration. Online assistance to applicants in applying to register to vote. Online completion and submission by applicants of the mail voter registration application. Online receipt of completed voter registration applications. And that states shall accept an online voter registration application provided by an individual under this section and ensure that the individual is registered to vote in the state. If individual meets the same voter registration requirements and individual provides a signature in electronic form. So I will ask, has anyone ever signed a document electronically? I have. I do it all the time. When you sign a document electronically, yes, some people do the little signature with their finger. Some people are really snazzy and they have a touchpad where you can actually use a little stylus and actually draw your name and have it be scanned into the computer. Most people just type their name and have the computer select a cursive font and apply it. I'm curious how this could ever pass any legitimate scrutiny. How can you possibly check a voter registration signature against a future signature if it's done electronically? I can tell you, even when I sign with my finger, or even when I've signed on a touchpad with a stylus, it has never actually looked like my signature. And most of the time, I just scribble just to get over it, just to get past it. Right? How do you use that signature to verify in the future that someone is who they say they are? No, you need pen to paper in a manner that will perfectly capture the stroke of the pen and in a way that people are used to signing so it can be replicatable. But no, internet registration. Sign however you want. Yeah, even just type your name. Times New Roman, that counts. So the next time someone comes in Times New Roman, or whatever. Yeah, it's the same person. They both type the same name into the same keyboard. That means they're the same person. Now, come on. And yeah, there's a way for you to upload a signature. Does anyone really think that that's going to work? Come on. Has anyone ever talked to a government employee, a bureaucrat? Has anyone ever tried to submit a document? I tried to submit my taxes, and my accountant got one number wrong on my son's social security number. So the IRS says we don't have a kid anymore. Right? It's a crazy situation. We're now fighting to prove that our kid's still around. Trust me, he's still around. He climbs over me every chance he gets. He literally punches me in the face just to give me a boo-boo so that he can then kiss it. He's into kissing boo-boos. So he actually hits me just to be able to kiss the boo-boo. Yeah, no one actually trusts a government agency to handle scanned documents to then put them in a file. No, it's insane. It's hard enough to sign your name on a piece of paper and trust that that gets handled correctly. But no, they want electronic registration as always. So we have automatic, we have same day, and we have internet registration, making it as easy as possible to register. Now, I get it that we should live in a country where there are not impediments to registering the vote, but we already live in that country, right? It's very easy to register to vote. Yeah, it takes some time. Yeah, you got to take some time out of your day, go down to whatever office you have to go to and sign some papers. It's a pain, right? But it's not like that's a violation of your rights. I'd love for any of the leftists, any of the Democrats who claim that the current system is violative to go through the process of buying a gun and tell me that that's okay. If it is unreasonable to have someone go to a location and sign their name on a real piece of paper to register to vote, if that's unreasonable, then the entire federal background check process should be unreasonable as well. Right? You can't have it both ways. Can't have it both ways. This is an interesting part that I didn't actually know that they had a name for it, but the left loves to create names for things to make things sound very, very sinister. Let's go ahead and put up image number 4. This is a provision to ban what the left apparently calls voter caging. I didn't even know this. I didn't even know this was a term. But no, they see something as very evil, so they've given it an evil term. The voter caging, the idea of putting a voter in a cage. So what is voter? Well, let's take that down for a second. What is voter caging? Voter caging is the practice of, allegedly, they allege that this is like a deliberate attempt to stop people from being on the voter rolls. When the state sends you a document or a letter, if that is returned to them by the Postal Service as not deliverable, meaning that the address doesn't exist or the person doesn't live at that address, the state then uses the list of non-deliverable forms to then say, okay, well, if we can't deliver mail to that person at that address, then that person must not live there, therefore that person shouldn't be registered to vote. It's a common sense thing. What the left claims is that Republicans deliberately do this, like they deliberately send things out just to find the people who don't actually live there. But the left's critique of voter caging doesn't change the ultimate fact of if someone is registered to vote at an address and they don't live at the address or the address doesn't exist, they shouldn't be registered to vote. Right? What the left is calling for is anytime a government document is sent to a non-existent voter at a non-existent address, we should just ignore that and let that name stay on the voter rolls at that address. Let's put image 4 back up. Voter caging and other questionable challenges. Prohibition against voter caging. No state or local election official shall prevent an individual from registering or voting in any election for federal office or permit in connection with any election for federal office a formal challenge under state law to an individual's registration status or eligibility to vote if the basis for such decision is evidence consisting of 1. A voter caging document or voter caging list, 2. An unverified match list, 3. An error or omission on any record or paper relating to any application, registration, or other act requisite to voting. Or 4. Any other evidence so designated for purposes of this section by the Election Assistance Commission. So, they leave that part open-ended. We'll wait for the Election Assistance Commission to find the other ways, the other exceptions. Basically, what they're saying is if you fill out your voter registration form wrong, that also shouldn't be held against you. And if the state tries to contact you to see if you actually live at your address and the mailman says, hey, this house doesn't exist. I'm here on a road. You mailed it to 10, the house number 10, and there's only 9 houses on the road. Doesn't exist. You have to keep them on their rolls anyway. Can't even scrutinize it. It's insane. Absolutely insane. Like who could possibly think that this is a way to strengthen our democracy? No, this is a way to ensure that bad voter registration entries stay on the voter rolls. They're trying to eliminate any effort to purge inactive, dead, criminals, people who've moved away, people who are otherwise ineligible to vote, trying to purge them from the voter rolls. We saw reports from this past year that ballots were sent to mental health institutions in states where you cannot vote if you're in a mental health institution, where ballots were sent to prisons, where state law in that case says you cannot vote if you are in prison. Well, yeah, they shouldn't be on the voter rolls. This provision would let that stay on. People asking who has sponsored the bill. It's Mr. Sarbanes, Miss Pelosi, and Miss Lofgren are the 3 lead co-sponsors of this bill. People asking where did this bill come from? This bill is actually a newer version of another bill that was filed last year. It passed the House last year, but it never reached the Senate. Democrats are hoping they can pass the House and pass the Senate. And the way they're doing that, we're not going to dive into these parts of the bill. The way they plan to do that is to actually get Republicans to vote for it by adding really measly clauses dealing with voter fraud. So they're adding slight changes to make it harder or make it easier to audit things, right? Mandating paper ballots, things like that, in the hopes that Republicans will be stupid enough to vote for this bill. Not saying that the whole thing's bad ideas. There are good ideas in the bill. But when you add it all together, when you count the points for each side, this is a net negative. This is a very big net negative.
Max, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what would prevent me from accidentally filling out the wrong name, accidentally filling out the wrong address, and accidentally filling out somebody that may not even exist, and then getting a ballot to an address that I could pick up? Would that?
That's the question.
That's
would that
be possible? I don't know. Hypothetically,
it would depend on the state. That's the ultimate complaint that conservatives have, is that all of the checks that are in place at the state and local levels to make sure that only legitimate people register to vote at legitimate addresses using legitimate names, all of the checks that are supposed to stop illegitimate voter registrations, not all of them, but most of them would be prohibited by this bill. So, yeah, I mean, I like to believe that no one would do that, but the fact that Democrats, this is H.R. 1. This is their first bill. H.R. 1, the first 10, 20 bills that they usually reserve those numbers, H.R. 1 through H.R. 20. They reserve those bills for the most important legislative agenda items. So other H.R. 2, 3, 4, those numbers might not even have been assigned yet. They're just holding on to them because that's just tradition. If it's a low number, it's a priority for whichever party controls that chamber. They gave it H.R. 1 because they really want to push this through. You have to ask yourself, why are Democrats so insistent on all of the safeguards designed to prevent illegal and fraudulent voter registrations? Why are they so adamant about lifting them and banning them and outlawing them? That's the ultimate question you have to ask. I have a hard time believing that it is for pure, just, and noble reasons, right? The argument that you have to do this to ensure that African Americans can vote, which is what they're claiming, like if you don't pass this bill, black people won't be able to vote. It just isn't a real argument. It's a racist argument. If it was real, it's racist, but it's not real. It's just made up. Just like so many things, they claim anything they don't like is racism. So, we'll see. But it was a great question, Josh. Again, our call-in number, 888-441-1121. Anyone who wants to ask a question about this bill, I know enough about it to answer your questions. I don't know everything about the bill. Still trying to figure it all out. But if you call 888-441-1121, be happy to answer any questions you have. So we're only on image 4. Let's kick this up a little bit. Go to image number 5. Transmission of blank absentee ballots to certain other voters. State responsibilities. Subject to the provisions of this section, each state shall transmit blank absentee ballots electronically to qualified individuals who request such ballots in the same manner and under the same terms and conditions under which the state transmits such ballots electronically to absent uniformed services voters and overseas voters. So basically, this is a provision attempting to get rid of any state law or state constitution that states you have to have a legitimate reason. So we talked about this in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's constitution technically says if you want an absentee ballot, you need to fall under certain categories to justify it. Now, that was a whole court case. We're not allowed to talk about the court case because apparently even just debating constitutional law is now anathema. But what this bill would do is supersede all those state laws, all those state constitutional provisions to require that pretty much anyone who wants a blank absentee ballot, anyone who requests it, you have to give it to them. Have to give it to them. Again, this is a state federal issue, right? Is this states' rights or do we live in a system where the federal government just controls everything? The founders were very nervous at the idea of federal officials being able to control how elections would be run. Why? When you give one person or just a couple people that much power, they tend to use it to better themselves and to better their own political party. And as we'll see with so many of these parts of the bill, yes, this is designed to increase Democrat turnout. Yes, it is designed to increase urban turnout. All those buzzwords, right? Yes, it is designed to increase low-income area turnout. Not necessarily meaning that every person who lives in a low-income area or everyone who has lower income is a Democrat. It's not true. But those are the buzzwords that they use to try and sneak extra turnout in their Democrat-controlled areas. So we know that this bill would say anyone who requests it, no matter what other state law or state constitutional provisions state, you have to send it to them, as long as they're a qualified voter. Let's go to image number 6. This is where the bill defines what the term qualified individual means. Qualified individual means any individual who is otherwise qualified to vote in an election for federal office and who meets any of the following requirements. The individual, 1, has previously requested an absentee ballot from the state or jurisdiction in which such individual is registered to vote, and 2, has not received such absentee ballot at least 2 days before the date of the election. The individual resides in an area of the state with respect to which an emergency or public health emergency has been declared by the chief executive of the state or of the area involved within 5 days of the date of the election. Interesting. The individual expects to be absent from such individual's jurisdiction, individual is hospitalized, or the individual has a disability. You see that part there where they talk about the emergency or public health emergency? Where all it takes to trigger unlimited vote by mail is for a public health official to say we have an infectious disease, we have a respiratory virus, or hey, it's hurricane season. It's always hurricane season in November. Hey, hurricane season, I predict there will be a hurricane, therefore, state of emergency, everyone gets an absentee ballot. It's insane. Absolute insanity. So it keeps going. Put up image 7. This is the provision of the bill, section 1911. Requirements for federal election contingency plans in response to natural disasters and emergencies. So the last time they put this bill through, they were much more forward with it, saying that if there's a national emergency, if there is an infectious disease, you need to send an absentee ballot to everyone in the state. That was last year's version. This year, they've tempered the language a bit to not be as forward, but ultimately the result is the same. Let's put that image 7 up again. Not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act, each state and each jurisdiction in a state, which is responsible for administrating elections, basically counties, towns, shall establish and make publicly available a contingency plan to enable individuals to vote in elections for federal office during a state of emergency, public health emergency, or national emergency, which has been declared for reasons including A, natural disaster, or B, an infectious disease. So instead of saying that each state has to automatically mail out a ballot to everyone anytime there's a respiratory virus, what this provision of the bill, this year's version, what it says differently, is that each state must create a contingency plan just in case there is a respiratory virus. So it doesn't automatically force you to send it out, but it says you have to be prepared to send it out in the case of a respiratory virus. But this is where the Democrats, again, the devil is always in the details with the Democrats. I'll say it right now. We're going to repeat it a couple times during the show. Hit that share button. Make sure you like and follow our Facebook page. Hit the share button on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And DLive, share it. Share DLive too. I want to give DLive some love because we're being not throttled, but we were demonetized on DLive. I like the platform. I just wish we were able to get some lemons. So we can't get any lemons. Lemons are their form of cryptocurrency, but we do in our panels on DLive have a panel for you to click if you want to donate directly to the show and bypass DLive entirely. And I'll go ahead. We have 10 lemons in our treasure chest. I'll go ahead and distribute those 10 lemons to whoever's watching on DLive. And everyone who has no idea what I'm talking about, 1 lemon equals 1.2 cents. So we're about to make it rain with 11 cents on DLive. So getting back to this, really important. So they don't require every state automatically every time there's a respiratory virus to mail out a ballot to everyone, but they require you to have a contingency plan. And this is how they get around it. Put up image number 8. It's in how they plan to enforce the requirement for the contingency plan. They give the power to the Attorney General of the United States. The Attorney General may bring civil action against any state or jurisdiction in an appropriate United States District Court for such declaratory, or injunctive relief, including a temporary restraining order, a permanent or temporary injunction, or other order, as may be necessary to carry out the requirements of this section. What does that mean? If you are a state, let's say you're a state like Georgia, not going to talk about 2020, just going to talk about hypothetical Georgia, and you have a contingency plan that the Biden administration believes is subpar, that it does not take into account the danger of the respiratory virus, and that you need to be forced to have more accessible mail-in voting regulations. The Attorney General can take you to court much the same way that Stacey Abrams took Georgia to court in the lead up to the election, and get a Democrat-appointed judge in a district court to place an injunction on the state of Georgia and to force them to enact regulations that go contrary to their own state law and state constitution. So in other words, if there is a respiratory virus and the Biden administration doesn't believe you're doing enough as that state representative or state governor or secretary of state, whatever, not doing enough to ensure that everyone gets a ballot, they can go to court and force you to. So that's the workaround. It doesn't automatically force you to. It gives the Attorney General the right to go to court and force you to. Sneaky, right? I mean, this is very sneaky, but this is basically taking all of the provisions that we saw enacted in 2020 in these swing states and trying to take them nationwide, make them mandatory, and give the government the power to go to court and enforce this if need be. Very, very sneaky. They made this bill how many pages? 791 pages long, expecting that you're not going to read it. And at this point, I've only read about half of it. I read the last version. This one's a little different. But they expect you not to read it. And they definitely expect you not to read subsection D about enforcement. So let's go to image 9. The bill would also prohibit states from restricting curbside voting. This is something we saw in Texas. It was actually challenged in Texas court. It was in my opinion, a very legitimate challenge. Texas law says that in order to vote, you have to vote in a polling location. And Texas law defines a polling location as a building with walls and a roof. So it was a very legitimate challenge. The Republican Party says, listen, you've had hundreds of thousands of people vote in their car. Their car is not a voting place. And they went to the court and said, you need to throw these ballots out. The judge says, no, I'm not going to throw the ballot out. I'm not going to disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of people. But it doesn't actually change the fact that the ultimate argument was true. Texas law requires you to vote in a polling place. If you're going to vote in person, you have to vote in a polling place. Well, this bill would basically supplant that kind of Texas law and require states to allow curbside voting. I mean, they're basically trying to turn voting into a trip to Taco Bell. Let's go back to image number 9. Prohibiting states from restricting curbside voting. A state may not prohibit any jurisdiction administering an election for federal office in the state from utilizing curbside voting as a method by which individuals may cast ballots in the election, or impose any restrictions which would exclude any individual who is eligible to vote in such an election in a jurisdiction which utilizes curbside voting from casting a ballot in the election by the method of curbside voting. Now, what's wrong with curbside voting? What's wrong? If there's a virus. There's a respiratory virus. Well, there's always a respiratory virus. I mean, see how easy it is to do this? Why wouldn't you want people just to be able to vote in the safety of their car? Well, ask yourself this. How do poll watchers examine curbside voting? What are the poll watchers hop in the passenger seat, hop in the back seat, and watch? No, this is an effort. Yeah, sure, it makes it more convenient. It makes it more helpful to people who don't want to leave their car. It also makes it impossible for the challengers, for the poll watchers, for party officials who are monitoring it to see what's going on. I mean, it's hard enough when you're forced to stand so far away from the actual voting, but you start putting it into a car. I mean, just think about it. They hand you the tablet. I mean, that's how they did in Texas. They had a little tablet, hand you the tablet, and then the person rolls up their window and tinted windows. Oh, sorry, no one's going to see whatever's going on in that car. It's a joke. And it's not to say that there aren't people out there that would benefit by this. I think my wife voted curbside. I told her not to. I told her that there was a risk that they were going to throw it out because technically it was illegal. She voted curbside because she was pregnant at the time when she voted early. She was pregnant, and she wanted to make sure she could vote before the baby was due. Ultimately, she would have been able to vote in person because the baby came like a week before, but she wanted to be safe. And I get it. I get it. But it doesn't mean that it's the right way to do it, right? You should actually have to, if you're not going to vote absentee, and my wife tried to vote absentee, but they couldn't get their act together. So she said, screw it. I don't want to risk them not actually sending me an absentee ballot. I'm just going to go vote curbside. If you want to vote in person, you should vote in person. And if your state requires you to be inside of a building to do it, then you have to be inside of a building to do it. This idea that the federal government can just change state laws like this, not only is that unconstitutional, but again, it opens up the door for funny business. That's not a comment on the 2020 election. That's a prediction on what would happen if this law was enacted. See how we're threading that needle? We're threading the needle of not violating Facebook or YouTube's terms of service. But no, that's what they want to do. They want to just, boop, let's just let everyone vote inside their car, put up their tinted windows, no one ask any questions. Incredible, incredible stuff. Again, call number 888-441-1121. Mr. Producer Josh says the phone lines are being lit up by trolls. So if you're trying to call in, be patient. It might take a while to get through the trolls. But again, our number 888-441-1121. Let's keep doing this dive. Let's go into image 10. So drop boxes. Use of secure drop boxes for voted absentee ballots, requiring use of drop boxes in each county in the state. Each state shall provide in-person, secured, and clearly labeled drop boxes at which individuals may, at any time during the period described in subsection B, drop off voted absentee ballots in an election for federal office. Minimum period for availability of drop boxes. It has to be available 45 days before the date of the election, which ends at the time that the polls close. Take that down. Interesting side note, as of last week, there is still a poll drop box that hasn't been removed in California. They just left it there. It's just chilling there. Interesting. Let's put that image 10 back up. Each state, so you have to make sure that it's accessible for disabilities. And then they say the rule of construction of how it has to be actually built. Again, to make sure it's completely accessible. So if your state says, like let's talk about hypothetically, not talking about 2020 election. Don't ban me, bro. Hypothetically, let's talk about Wisconsin law. Wisconsin still has a state law on the books that says any ballot drop-off location has to be staffed. That's still the law. Not going to talk about whether they followed that law in 2020, but moving forward, that's still the law in Wisconsin. This provision, Section 311 of H.R. 1, would supplant that and force the states to have drop boxes. And this is how I know that it supplants the requirement that it be staffed. The section of that, Section 311A, put it back up, Mr. Producer, image 10. The boxes must be available, quote, at any time. So if you want to go drop off a box at 3 a.m., your ballot at 3 a.m., they have to let you do it outside of business hours. No one actually thinks that you'd be able to staff every drop box 24 hours a day. No one has that kind of funding, right? No one has it. That's how they get around that. So we have a caller, Suzanne, wants to talk about how if the government wanted to, they could make at-home voting a thing with existing identifiers. Yeah, they probably could. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Hi, Max. How are you today?
Pretty good. How you doing? Just want to be very careful and warn you, do not make any comment about the 2020 election. We're talking hypotheticals moving forward.
Yep.
Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. What's your question or comment?
So, you were talking about online at-home voting and so forth, and, there's no way to really verify the individual. And as a former government employee, it's very easy to identify an individual because of unique identifications. You go to a bank, you have a card that identifies who you are when you pull out money out of your ATM. In the government, you had a common access card with a unique ID, so we could digitally sign in documents, and it was verified. I'm the only person that has that unique ID. It could be done. It's just a matter of being able to get that technology to everybody. Whereas, if you want to vote from home, you have to request a unique ID card. There's going to have to be a way to somehow, whether you have a common access card reader to hook into your tablet or whatever. There are ways to do it to verify that this is one person. And by the way, once you vote, that unique ID is entered into the system, and it cannot be duplicated. It cannot be used again.
So here's the problem.
Option.
Here's the problem. You're right. It is possible to give everyone a card reader, everyone a card. It's possible. The problem is there's other sections in the bill that we haven't gotten to yet. We'll jump ahead now. Other sections of the bill that make it impossible. Ms. Bruiser, while keeping her on the phone, put up image number 14. This is section 307, promoting the ability of voters to vote by mail. Scroll all the way down to section 2A, prohibiting identification requirements as a condition for obtaining a ballot. So there's another section of the bill that prohibits any ID, any form of ID, from ever being used as a mechanism to vote. So, yeah, technically, if everyone had the scanners, everyone could swipe their card, then yeah, technically. But don't worry, the Democrats have actually thought about that, and they want to make sure that isn't possible by banning voter ID.
Well done. So much for my good idea.
No. I appreciate the call. I mean, it's possible. It's possible to do. Like, nothing is impossible. We live in a world, like, short of, like, teleportation and crazy things like that, nothing is really impossible. We're talking about an individual basically giving their preference to another individual and having that individual record it. Obviously, there are ways to do that electronically if you really wanted to. Now, anytime it's electronically done, you run the risk of bad actors because anything that's connected to the internet can be hacked. I highly doubt that any kind of device that they give out in your hypothetical scenario would have the same kind of security parameters that we see in major like defense installations, right? We're not talking about big security. It would probably be very easy to hack it. So, I mean, that's another concern. But yeah, no, it's definitely possible. The question is whether the juice is worth the squeeze and whether it's worth it to send everyone like a ID card reader so that they can vote from home instead of having to actually go down to their polling place or just requesting an absentee ballot. That's the question for me. Obviously, it's possible, but there are provisions that we hadn't got to yet, which kind of shoots the hole in it, at least for this bill. But the Democrats thought about all those hypotheticals, and they put language in the legislation making sure it wouldn't be possible. That, no, you have to do it their way with no actual ID.
Okay, well, that makes no sense, but hey. It was written by Democrats.
Yeah. Well, I do appreciate the call, and I'm sorry that I had to shoot the hole in your theory.
Yeah.
But don't worry, the Democrats did it. Yeah, there's always a way. If there's a will, there's a way. They just don't have the will to have secure elections.
All right. Well, I'll go back to the drawing board.
Well, I guarantee that by the time you draw something up, they'll have figured out a workaround. I guarantee it. There'll be an amendment. So make sure you keep it to yourself. All right. Thanks for the call. Thank you for the call. Really do appreciate it. 888-441-1121. I felt bad. I was letting her talk, and we were just on image 10. I just had to jump to image 14 to talk about it. I felt bad, but yeah, it's the Democrats thought about that. Like, they do not want people to have to show ID as a condition for obtaining a ballot or a condition of voting. They don't want that. So, I mean, as I said, if there's a will, there is always a way. But as we see with the Democrats, they have no will to have secure voting. They just don't. Connor in the comment section says we need "Don't Ban Me Bro" t-shirts. I agree. That's a great idea. I'm going to see if we can find a way to use some kind of logo that's similar to Facebook and Twitter without violating their trademarks. That's a great idea. Don't ban me, bro. Miss Producer, jot that down so I don't forget it. I love those t-shirts. So we were just on image, where were we at? We were at image 10, the drop boxes. This is where it really gets very screwy. And this will probably be the last image we get to in this hour before we come back for the next hour. So if you're calling 888-441-1121, don't fret. We'll get you on the other side of the hour, but I'll leave this hour with this. Let's put up image number 11. The number of drop boxes. So Democrats have created a formula for determination of the number of drop boxes. So let me read this. In the case of a county in which the number of individuals who are residents of the county and who are registered to vote in the election is equal or greater than 20,000, the number of drop boxes shall be equal to or greater than the number of such individuals divided by 20,000. So if it's 20,000 people in the county, that means 1 ballot box. If there's 40,000 people in the county, 2, 60, 3, 80, 4, 100,000, 5. You start getting into the millions, you can see how this number of drop boxes can actually get pretty high up there. So they have a whole formula for determining how many drop boxes there will be. And we'll get to this on the other side of the break because I'll have to do some number crunching. As you'll see in really populous metro counties, the number of drop boxes gets pretty large. So we're going to take a real quick break. We'll come back on the other side of this. We have more of the bill to get through. Again, our call-in number 888-441-1121. If you have a question, comment, suggestion, if you have a way to make it secure, again, I guarantee the Democrats have figured out a way to unsecure it. But feel free to call in 888-441-1121, and we will be back on the other side of this really quick break.
Ronald Reagan famously said that our freedoms are never more than a generation away from extinction. Conservative Daily exists to make sure that never happens. With our community of 700,000 members, we fight every day to hold Congress's feet to the fire and stop them from surrendering our rights and freedoms. The fight to take this country back is not over. Please join our movement right now by going to conservative-daily.com and clicking the subscribe button to sign up for our free call to action newsletters. We have a chance to save this country, but only if we all work together. Again, this is conservative-daily.com, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button at the top.
Attention, Conservative Daily fans and listeners. CD is back. And now your host, Max McGuire.
Muted. Sorry about that. I muted to make sure I didn't hear I didn't accidentally talk during the break. Back from the break, we're talking about HR 1. HR 1, the Democrats' bill to try and take every change that they implemented in 2020 and make it go nationwide moving forward. Mr. Bruce, go ahead and put up my screen. Got to make sure we mention this. The Senate is now signing in senators to begin the impeachment trial. So this is basically a roll call vote. They're all racing down there. Not a lot of social distancing. They're not really doing electronic voting there. All old-fashioned pen to paper. But they're all at least getting their own unique pen. I guarantee you Nancy Pelosi will probably auction off those pens, or Chuck Schumer will auction off those pens for some kind of Donald Trump bad, Orange Man bad charity or something. But we'll keep an eye on this. Not a lot's going to happen in the Senate today with this. Now, the way the law and the rules work is that as soon as the Senate receives the article of impeachment, the Senate has to begin the trial the next day. But the Senate gets to then decide the rules for the trial and stipulate when things will happen. So this is them obeying the law, obeying the Senate and House rules, and starting the trial the next day. But then they're going to say that Trump and the prosecution will have a couple of weeks. We'll have until the 6th, or the 8th, basically a week and a half to submit their briefs and then come back on the 8th and actually have oral arguments. So Oh, not a lot of social distancing there. Get 6 feet back, sir.
I'm sorry, Max. That's
her
probably
nose,
your own. That's
her
your depth
nose
perception.
is above her mask.
It's your depth perception. It's most likely.
No, her nose was certainly was certainly above her mask.
I'm pretty sure that you're just wrong, and it's depth. It's TV ads 10 pounds.
Yeah. It's yeah. I have no doubt about that. So we can go ahead and take that down. We'll watch that and see if anything significant happens. If it does, we will cut into it. But I think this is mainly just a formality of having all the different senators sign their names. Oh, there's one guy here very close to her. He's like inches away from her face. That is not social distancing at all. I'm going to take that down just so I don't get distracted by the Democrats' violation of their own social distancing rules. Just before we get into all of it, great time. We're talking about social distancing. Put up my screen right before we get back into the HR1. Anthony Fauci now says that double masking makes common sense and is likely more effective. So anyone keeping score at home, Fauci started with no masks. Then he said everyone should wear 1 mask. And now he's saying you should wear 2 masks. Just want to make sure everyone knows who's keeping score at home. And put up image number 16, Mr. Producer. Fauci wants you to know that wearing 2 masks is likely more effective than wearing 1. Image for effect. Go ahead and take that down. Thought that was interesting. Another bit of interesting news. This one just made me chuckle. Put up my screen again, Mr. Producer, while we're talking about COVID briefly. Duterte refuses to have vaccine on camera because he wants to take it in his butt. Yes, that is a real article of the leader of the Philippines refusing to take it on camera because he wants them to stab him in his gluteus maximus as opposed to his arm. Very creative headline. Why it's in Yahoo Sports, I have no clue. But thumbs up to whatever editor wrote that headline. I'm going to take that down. We'll get back into the bill. That's enough distractions. Enough distractions. April in the comments section on YouTube says, "Oh my goodness, double condoms too?" No, I don't think he'll recommend that. If he recommends that, then we'll know that there's some funny business going on. So let's do it. Let's dive back into this. We talked about the drop boxes. I did some brief math over the break. Island of Manhattan, New York County has 8,419,000 residents. What that means is that Manhattan, New York County would require 421 drop boxes under this law. 421 drop boxes. It's a lot of drop boxes. I get it. It's a pretty significant area. I mean, it's not as big as many other counties in the United States, but 421 seems like a lot. Seems like a lot. I don't know. Let me know if you think that seems like a lot. Carl in the comment section says, "I tried watching a White House presser. I just couldn't." Okay, well, you just changed the topic again, so I don't feel as bad doing this. Mr. Producer, in case anyone hasn't watched any press conferences and still wants to know why we aren't covering them live like we used to, let's play this short compilation of Psaki's press conference the other day. Let's go ahead and play cut number 2.
President Biden
Yep, we're gonna let this ride. This is a minute and a half, folks. And this is one press conference. Notice how she's wearing the same outfit. Actually, maybe she just doesn't do laundry. That could happen too. Don't want the fact checkers to get me. This is real, folks.
Sure.
Keeps going.
And as well, Peter, the
I'm sorry, Max. Did I hit repeat? I think I hit repeat.
No,
I'm sure I did. I think I made a mistake.
No,
I think I hit repeat.
That was
I'm sorry about
one video. That's one press conference. One press conference. Someone in the YouTube comment section says this is torture. I agree. I thought it was pretty funny. Take a quick break from HR1. It makes you miss Kaylee. It even makes you miss Sean Spicer. Right? It definitely makes you miss Huckabee Sanders. I mean, this woman is not ready for prime time. She's not. And I get it. Sometimes people say, when they're trying to find their thought, but you can't do that. And yeah, sure, it's linked together to make it look really foolish. But you watch it regular speed without cuts, you still come away with the same takeaway that, wow, this woman needs a lot of filler words in order to get her point across. Just thought that was interesting. Okay. Enough of the distractions. Enough of the world leaders wanting to get the COVID vaccine in their butts. Let's get back to HR 1. So as I said, Island of Manhattan, New York County would need 421 drop boxes under this bill. Democrats have a formula for just how many unsecured drop boxes they want to have. And we'll get to the voter ID part, but go to image 12, Mr. Producer. This is section 303A, permitting use of sworn written statement to meet identification requirements. So if you are in a state that says you must have voter ID to vote, this section says you don't have to show ID. Instead, you can just sign a piece of paper that says, I am who I say I am. And that has to be good enough. Oh, I'm sorry. Put it back up. I can't keep laughing. I have to read it. If a state has in effect a requirement that an individual present identification as a condition of receiving and casting a ballot in an election for federal office, saying if a state has voter ID laws, the state shall permit the individual to meet the requirement, A, in the case of an individual who desires to vote in person by presenting the appropriate state or local election official with a sworn written statement signed by the individual under penalty of perjury, attesting to the individual's identity and attesting that the individual is eligible to vote in the election. Or B, in the case of an individual who desires to vote by mail, by submitting the ballot with the statement described in subparagraph A. Development of pre-printed version. Okay, so we take it down. Two things to kind of digest here. Voter ID would be a thing of the past. There would be no such thing as voter ID. You'd just be able to say, I am who I say I am. And that makes it true. And notice how the bill doesn't require that states take it as a conditional ballot, right? It doesn't say that states can set it aside and have you come back with your ID at a later date. No, it says right off the bat, if someone doesn't want to show you their ID, they sign their name and that just makes it so. Well, that's for in person. It also says that if you want to vote by mail, you don't have to show ID and you just sign your name on the bottom and that's good enough. That's the same, right? This idea that, I want to vote by mail. Well, let's just talk. Let's spread this out and do all the hypotheticals. So someone registered same day on the internet and they want to vote absentee over the internet and they don't have any ID proving that they live where they say they are. And, if you ever sent mail to that person at that address and the post office said it doesn't exist, you're not allowed to use that against them. So instead of showing ID, they're just going to sign remotely a statement that says, I am who I say I am, and you have to count that ballot. I mean, that's just a little piece of what we've already talked about put together in the hypothetical. What? No, you can't just get rid of voter ID and saying they can just sign I am who I say I am, and that's it. I mean, no. You need ID. You can just show ID. Show your identification, have someone look at the picture, verify it's you, scan it, make sure it's a real ID, and give it back to you. Not, I am who I say I am, and I signed it using some cursive font electronically. Yeah, what? Come on. At this point, I feel like they're just trolling us, seeing how much they can put into this bill before we catch them. But no, they want to add that in as well. Put up image number 13. This is about early voting. Each state shall allow individuals to vote in an election for federal office during an early voting period. Well, every state pretty much does. The length of the period. Early voting period required under the subsection with respect to an election shall consist of a period of consecutive days, including weekends, which begins on the 15th day before the date of the election. So you have to have at least 15 early voting days. Some states have more, some states have less. Some states have many less, but it would change their state laws and make it be 15. Let's go back, put it back up, image 13. Minimum early voting requirements. Allow voting for no less than 10 hours on each day. Have uniform hours each day for which such voting occurs. So you can't have different hours on a Sunday. You have to have the same hours. So you have to have workers work 10 hours on a Sunday. Allow such voting to be held for some period of time prior to 9 a.m. and some period of time after 5 p.m. So how does that work? Oh, so you have to... Oh, this is stupid. So you have to have at least 10 hours, right? So a 9 to 5 is, 8 hours. So they're saying that 8 hours is not good enough. You have to have 10. But you can't make it 9 to 7. You have to make it at least 8 to 6. You see what I'm saying? You can't make it 7 to 5. That would be 10 hours, but that's not good enough. Because the law would also say you need 1 hour after 5. So it has to be 8 to 6, at least. It's just a weird way of writing something very restrictive. Huh. Put it back up, Mr. Producer. Image 13. Proximity to public transportation to the greatest extent practicable. A state shall ensure that each polling place which allows voting during an early voting period under subsection A is located within walking distance of a stop on a public transportation route. Take it back down. What does that mean? There's no federal law defining what walking distance is. Well, no, this is a term put in there so that, as we mentioned, the Attorney General can then sue a state if, in their opinion, a polling place is not walking distance from a bus stop or subway stop. Now, what is walking distance? I don't know. Maybe someone can let me know what the federal definition of walking distance is. It's just very, very subjective, very, very vague. And I mean, considering that they also say it has to be ADA compliant, that seems very ableist. Right? There are people out there who can't walk. So why would you say walking distance? It seems very ableist of the Democrats. Shame on them. Let's put that back up, image 13. Availability in rural areas. The state shall ensure that polling places which allow voting during an early voting period under subsection A will be located in rural areas of the state, and shall ensure that such polling places are located in communities which will provide the greatest opportunity for residents of rural areas to vote during an early voting period. So in urban areas, every bus stop gets a polling place, right? But in rural America, this is, oh yeah, you have to have at least one place to vote in a rural area. You see, it's so transparent. It's so transparent that they're just saying oh, you need at least 421 drop-off locations on the Isle of Manhattan. You're also going to need a polling place. No polling place can be farther than a couple blocks from a public transportation. Oh, but you live in rural America, you get one. They just have to have at least one. We have Larry on the phone. Larry wants to talk about how crazy it would be to pass this. Yes, it would be very crazy. Larry, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Max?
Pretty good. Just going to give you the same disclaimer that I said earlier. Do not mention the 2020 election, not because we don't want to talk about it, because we don't want the show to be taken down because you mentioned it. So just same disclaimer.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm with you. No problem. It just, I mean, how can they pass something like this? I know it's not passed yet, but how can you have people even acknowledge this as something real?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
I mean, well, this is the Democrats' #1 bill. It's not. They're not just saying that this is real. They're saying that if they accomplish nothing but this, then the entire 2 years of this congressional term will be a success. So this is the first bill. The first bill that's filed. You can't be H.R. 1 unless you're the first bill filed. And this is what they're prioritizing.
It's just nuts if it can get anywhere close to being done. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah. I mean
people like me, I mean, what are we going to do?
Go ahead. Yeah, well, that's why we're spending these 2 hours doing a deep dive into it because, again, as I mentioned, it's 791 pages right now. That's before it's even gone through markup, before they've even added any amendments to it. It'll probably, if it goes through that process, reach 1,000 pages. The reason that we are covering this is because no one else is. Yeah, Tucker Carlson from a 30,000-foot level is spending a couple minutes on it. And I get it. He doesn't have the time to do 2 hours deep dive. But that's why we're doing this, and why we're going to keep doing this for other bills, because these little snippets are important. It's language that's matter, and where it matters, and where it's deliberately left vague is for a reason, so the administration can take them to court the way Stacey Abrams did. I mean, this is a train wreck of a bill, and the fact that the Democrats are saying that this is like racial justice on steroids. They're saying, oh, we need to help the African American community vote. They're basically saying all these lies to try and gin up support for it. And they're attaching just enough election security measures to try and get Republicans on board. That's what terrifies me, right? What we're talking about on its own, would never pass in the GOP, but they're adding just enough election reform, hoping that they can get enough Republicans on.
Oh my word! I pray nobody's going to do that. This is so dumb. I haven't heard of anything this dumb in a long time. I won't get into
and we're 1 week. But we're 1 week into the term.
Yeah, I can only talk about this week, man.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, it's going to be a long 4 years. It is.
Yeah, but how are people going to accept that though? If it does pass, I mean, I don't see it.
If it passes, go ahead, keep going. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're right. I can be cut off anytime. Unfortunately, I've had 4 strokes, bro, and I don't talk real quick. But anyhow, I believe in what you guys are doing, and you and Joe and Josh are awesome. I love you guys. Been listening steadily for 6 months, and
thank you.
Thank God for you guys. I'm just so proud of you guys. Keep doing it. I'm going to pray for you guys. I just can't. I don't know what's going to happen with people that are going to be so upset with this kind of thing trying to be passed. If they know about it,
the good news
you're doing a good job.
News is,
the
good news is that even if it, and you're speaking plenty fast, so don't ever let anyone tell you you aren't. The good news is that even if Republicans, if they get the 10 Republicans to cave and vote for this, even if they do, right, you're still going to see states like Texas, as I mentioned. Texas has a law on the books that says you have to be in a polling place to vote in person. Texas will then sue to try and get this whole thing thrown out. Now, the Democrats have also included a lot of severability clauses in this, which severability, you don't have to get into that too deep, but severability is the idea that if any one clause is ruled unconstitutional, it doesn't topple the entire law. So you'd still be able to fight on a constitutional ground, saying that the federal government has no right to tell Texas or any other state how to conduct their elections. And it's a fruitful argument. What I'm concerned about is that those same kinds of arguments were made, and when they were made before the election, they were told by the courts that there's no one harmed yet, so you have no standing. And then when they were made after the election, those same kind of arguments, the ruling was you waited too long. So that's the main concern I have. That even if they challenge, you have activist judges saying, sorry, too early or too late. There's no real Goldilocks zone for challenging these things.
Oh, boy. That's going to make Texas mad, man.
Oh, yeah. Texas is already mad.
Thank you for bringing this up to us and letting everybody know, man. It's great of you. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you so much, Larry, for the call. Really do appreciate it. Again, our number, 888-441-1121, if you want to join the show. This is crazy stuff. This is crazy stuff, that just rewriting the election law. And I'm not saying that anything in here on its face is unreasonable. Like, it's very reasonable to say that you want, like there are provisions in here that say every polling place has to have ADA compliant ramps. Like that's legitimate. Like I understand that, right? There are things in here that are very fair, but there are also things in here that are deliberately designed to increase Democrat turnout. I mean, we just talked about it. Put back up image 13. Image 13, if you're in an urban area, there has to be a polling place within walking distance of a public transportation stop. If you're in a rural area, the only requirement is that they have to have at least one polling place. like it's very obvious where they want to turn out the vote and where they don't. They're not even trying to pretend anymore. Go ahead and take that down, Mr. Producer. They're not even trying to pretend. Let's go back to image 14. We brought this up earlier briefly. Section 307, promoting the ability of voters to vote by mail. Administration of voting by mail, subsection A2A, prohibiting identification requirement as a condition of obtaining a ballot. A state may not require an individual to provide any form of identification as a condition of obtaining an absentee ballot, except that nothing in this paragraph may be construed to prevent a state from requiring a signature of the individual or similar affirmation as a condition of obtaining an absentee ballot. Also, subsection B, put it back up, prohibiting requirement to provide notarization or witness signature as a condition of obtaining or casting a ballot. A state may not require notarization or witness signature or other formal authentication other than voter attestation as a condition of obtaining or casting an absentee ballot. Two really big parts here. You cannot require voter ID if someone wants to vote by mail, and you cannot require any witness signature or notarization requirement. The only thing you can accept is the voter attesting that they are who they say they are. Now, tell me how that doesn't open up the door for fraud. Obviously it does. Obviously it does. So we have Kenny on the line. Kenny wants to talk about a person being prevented from voting on religious grounds. Maybe Mr. Producer Josh just didn't explain it well. Kenny, welcome to the show. Again, same disclaimer, don't talk about the 2020 election. What's your question or comment?
I got you. I appreciate everything you guys do, but I just want to talk to you. My wife, she's a Jehovah's Witness, and it's strictly against their religion to, vote or be any part of government. And I know there's other religions that do that, and if they did the automatic voter registration, that would go against some of their religious beliefs. And couldn't that be, something that's going to clog up the voter registration with people that are never going to vote?
That is an interesting hypothetical I hadn't even thought of. Yes, for the government to automatically register someone to vote who has a deeply held religious belief that she should not participate in an election would obviously be a violation of her First Amendment right. Yeah, no, that's a hypothetical I didn't even think of. I didn't even know that that Jehovah's Witnesses didn't want to participate in elections. But that's a legitimate argument. So if a state was forced to register all of them, each one of them is a constitutional violation, which would make this whole statute null and void. Yeah. Well, not the statute, at least that section.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I appreciate all you guys do.
So your wife doesn't vote? Your wife doesn't vote at all? She doesn't participate in politics at all?
No, sir.
So how does that work? Obviously, you're into politics because you watch and listen to the show. How does that work with you and her?
Well, it's just, that's her beliefs, and I, respect her for that. And, I kind of, like I would look at anybody else, that, you have your beliefs and I have my beliefs, and I don't let my beliefs, interfere with anybody else's.
So if you go to the kitchen table for dinner and say, like, damn Joe Biden, what he's doing, does she just, put her hands in her ears and go, la, 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 don't listen?
Oh, no, not necessarily. No, we talk about it, but it's just, it's just, when it comes to election time, it's all on me. So.
Gotcha. Well, that's interesting. And yeah, if this, God forbid, this passes, that would be a very easy lawsuit to win for your wife and for everyone else who is a Jehovah's Witness, because obviously. And I thought that might
be. That might be something you can add on your fax blast too. That would be a violation.
I definitely will. That's an interesting interesting take on it. Yeah, no, that's a great comment. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that's it. I just appreciate everything you guys do and keep fighting the good fight. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the call, Kenny. Really do appreciate it. That I love those kinds of calls because I'm doing a deep dive, and even the deep dive has blinders on. Even I have tunnel vision focusing on specific aspects of the law that I think are important, of the bill that I think are important. And I love getting a call like that where they force me to take a step back, open up the blinders a little bit, and think about it from a perspective that I didn't even consider. So yeah, something like Jehovah's Witness makes absolute sense. There are definitely constitutional violations if they were to be automatically registered to vote. Also, very big deal if someone was to vote on their behalf, right? Imagine if you believe with every fiber of your being that you should not participate in any election. Imagine going into and I highly suggest, Kenny, that if your state allows it, to look and see whether your wife has ever voted. I've done it with family members, elderly family members. People have really startling responses sometimes. Check to see, because imagine having that deeply held religious belief and finding that not only are you registered to vote against your will, but someone has voted on your behalf. Imagine how violative that would feel.
Well, imagine being Amish and getting a...
Well, the Amish vote.
Some don't.
Some don't, but that's more of a personal thing.
But could
it's
you
more
imagine
of a personal thing.
Having those kind of restrictions and then the government forcing you to vote, or at least get a ballot?
Or
that's what it feels like.
Native Americans.
Absolutely.
Like that. That's another gray area of the law where Native American tribes are technically a nation within a nation. We have treaties with the Native American nations to automatically register a member of another nation to vote. Would seem very violative of those treaties. Not saying that Native Americans shouldn't vote, but if they don't want to, they shouldn't automatically be registered. No one should automatically be registered to vote. I get the whole deal of you want to make voting as easy as possible, but the most basic barrier to entry should be someone standing up and say, yeah, I would like to vote. Like that's basic. It's as basic as it gets. They should have to stand up and say, or they can sit down, I don't care. But they should have to actually say in some way, please register to me to vote. I want to vote. It just seems very basic to me. But yeah, no, there's tons of hypotheticals like that. I didn't even think about. Very, very good points. So that's the crux of the bill. We've gotten through most of the parts that I had prepared today. There's other parts in the bill that I don't have screenshots for, but I can just generally explain to you. There is a provision in the bill to add new ethics standards for Supreme Court justices. So they want to basically, right now, the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court wants to, if a justice on the Supreme Court wants to recuse themselves, it's pretty much up to them. There's no higher authority, right? It's up to the justice to decide whether or not to recuse. If they don't believe they should recuse, there's no appeals process. Whereas a lower court, if a district court or appeals court judge were to not recuse in a case where they should have, it could reach the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court could overturn it for that violation. The Supreme Court doesn't have that higher authority. The Democrats want to create that higher authority to basically create a whole code of conduct and code of ethics for the Supreme Court, not to automatically remove the Supreme Court, but to create conditions that would comply with the Constitution's stipulations that Supreme Court justices can be removed from office through impeachment for high crimes or misdemeanors, right? So before this, you need a Supreme Court justice actually to break the law. Well, if Congress passes a law that says this is what ethics mean, and a Supreme Court justice votes on a case that Congress thinks they should have recused themselves on, they could then vote to impeach a Supreme Court justice for that. Now, listen, they don't really care if there's actually a high crime or misdemeanor, but it'll be easier for them to sell it. So that's one of the provisions. The other provision would be to get dark money out of politics. What's dark money? Dark money is what the left loves to call donations that come into 501c3 and 501c4 organizations that are then rerouted towards political expenditures. Unions have been doing this for decades, right? Unions buy political ads. They use their power to influence politics. Well, in the Supreme Court, Citizens United versus FEC. The Supreme Court ruled that if the unions are able to do it, then these other organizations, 501c3 and C4 organizations, should also be allowed to do it as well. So what you had in Citizens United was you had the organization Citizens United wanted to release a documentary about Hillary Clinton. The FEC says you cannot air that documentary because it is close to an election, and doing so would constitute an illegal contribution towards the election, because organizations can't donate to candidates. Supreme Court says no, just because you join an association doesn't mean you leave your First Amendment rights at the door, and therefore an association of free individuals also have free speech rights. So an organization can air a documentary without it being an expenditure, and they can spend money on ads, on billboards, right? Get out the vote kind of stuff. Democrats want to get rid of that. What's interesting is that the new report I was just reading says that Joe Biden won with $145 million of dark money. So the very things that the Democrats accuse Republicans of doing, they apparently do themselves. And dark money means once you donate to these organizations, there's no obligation for the organization to publish the list of donors. Now, if you donate to a campaign, they have to publish that list. If you donate to a 501c4 organization, they don't. So one of those things in the bill would require that these organizations have more transparency. Why? Well, Democrats want to know who to cancel. Right? They want to know who to cancel. I was reading something, my wife showed it to me, about one of these mommy bloggers. My wife's all into mommy bloggers. We have 2 kids, so she reads it. And one of the mommy bloggers is getting canceled in the mommy blogging community because she and her husband donated to Donald Trump. So because they donated to Donald Trump, their names appeared on the FEC disclaimer forms, and people went through it, found that she had 1.3 million followers, and now everyone's trying to cancel her. Well, imagine if they could do the same for the NRA-ILA, which is the NRA's lobbying arm. Imagine if they could do the same for, I don't know, as I said, Citizens United, any of these other organizations that you donate to. If they could force that organization to publish a list of all of its donors, well, then the left would know who to target. They would know who to cancel. Very, very sinister. Sinister, sinister stuff. And then there's another provision in the bill that would force anyone running for president to fully lay out their tax returns. Yeah, they're actually putting that in the bill. If you want to run for president, you have to release your tax returns. Why? Not that it actually matters for the election. They want to be able to go through their taxes. Democrats already do this, right? Democrats' taxes are always squeaky clean. Always squeaky clean because these people are public servants. And all the kickbacks that Joe Biden was getting, remember, 10% for the big guy, that's all happening under the table. Right? In that situation, the 10% for the big guy, Hunter Biden was holding 10% on behalf of his father. That never showed up in Joe Biden's books. Right? So Democrats' books are always squeaky clean. Republicans, where they're in business, where they have write-offs, right? Where they build jobs, where they carry over losses. Republicans' taxes are always much more complicated, especially if they are a business owner going into politics. So the Democrats want to force political candidates to release their taxes so that they can go through them, nitpick them, and find ways to accuse them of not paying enough taxes. Now listen, when you file your taxes, it's between you and the IRS. And in a lot of ways, it's a game of chicken. Your accountant is trying to get you as many write-offs as possible. The IRS is trying to get you as little write-offs as possible if you file as a self-employed individual. Imagine if politics came into it. Like, why would Donald Trump have ever released his tax returns so that every Democrat, whether they're an accountant or not, could go through it and find a new way for the IRS to go after him? No. Yeah, there are times where people do write-offs and the IRS doesn't catch them. And if it lasts a certain number of years, statute of limitations, they can't get it back, right? Why would any presidential candidate who comes from a business perspective ever submit their tax returns? It's suicide. And that's not saying that they're submitting fraudulent taxes. You take a tax return for someone who is a business owner or self-employed, and you show it to 10 different accountants, they will all come up with a different opinion on whether or not certain deductions are legitimate or not. It's all subjective. So why would any business-minded candidate ever do it? Well, that's why the Democrats want to force them. So lots of little things like this. Lots of little things like this in the bill. It's a monstrous bill. Absolutely monstrous bill. So, as I said, 791 pages. Ridiculous, ridiculous stuff. And apparently, Democrats have added just enough election security measures that they believe will get Republicans on board. Not like conservatives. I'm talking the wishy-washies like Lindsey Graham, wishy-washies like Mitt Romney, Mitch McConnell, who are looking to try and do something bipartisan. And they're more than happy to give away the farm in exchange for a few token election security changes. So what can you do about this? What can you do about this? I'm covering this. I covered this for now we're going on an hour and 40 minutes so far. The reason we spent 2 hours on this is because someone has to. Someone has to. Because the mainstream media sure isn't. But someone has to. So if you like this kind of reporting, like this kind of coverage, there is a donation link in the Facebook, YouTube, and DLive sections. DLive, it's in the, it's in the panels. Donate. We're also running a Fax Blast campaign today. It's not today's Fax Blast. That'll come out after the show. But this is a Fax Blast on this issue, fighting back against H.R. 1. If you support this and you want to take action, join the Fax Blast campaign, put pressure on Democrats and Republicans alike to kill this bill. Also, reach out to your representative, your senators, in whichever way is easiest for you. If that's calling them, if that's emailing them, if that's showing up at their office, right? Make sure you reach out, because the way we stop Republicans and the blue dog Democrats from passing this thing is making them understand that it would be politically untenable for them to do so. Now, we've said this on the show before. It only takes a couple hundred people reaching out to a congressman or congresswoman for them to change their mind. Why? The way it works in D.C. is they figure that if something is important enough for a couple hundred people to call their office about it, then obviously there are tens of thousands more who don't have time to do it. I forget the number. There are different people that claim it's different numbers. I've always heard a couple hundred. A couple hundred can actually sway, because they assume not everyone who cares about the issue is going to take the time to reach out. So a couple hundred people truly can change the trajectory of a bill. So if you haven't already, join the Fax Blast campaign or reach out to your members of Congress however you see fit. Because this is a big issue. Not talking about 2020, and that's not, as I said at the start of the show, not cowardice. Just we got to keep our eye on the ball, and it's not worth getting deplatformed, rehashing what we've already talked about. This is looking forward. This is an attempt to take everything that the Democrats put into effect in 2020 to make it permanent and to make it nationwide. They're doing it for a reason. They're doing it for a reason because they know that if this becomes law, Democrats will never lose again. It's not bipartisan in the sense that Republicans will benefit, Democrats will benefit. If this passes, right, Democrats will never lose again. So we need to fight like the future of our country is at stake, because it really is. So again, however you want to fight back against this, make sure you do it. And if you want to join our Fax Blast campaign, support the channel and let your voice be heard. So that's all I had. Thought Joe was going to be on. I planned today's show to have him on, and if he was on, probably we'd be right at that 2-hour mark right now. But he's not on. So I want to end it with this. We ended with a couple things, but Mr. Producer, put up image 15. Sorry, not my screen. Image 15. I want to. This is something that the Donald J. Trump for President Inc. just filed with the FEC, and they filed this yesterday. And I'll read it. Donald J. Trump for President Inc. is filing this miscellaneous report to disavow the activities of a committee named Patriot Party, whose listed treasurer is Michael Joseph Gall. Won't read his address. On January 22nd, 2021, Patriot Party filed a Form 1 listing Donald J. Trump for president as a participant in purported joint fundraising activities. DJTFP did not authorize this filing of Form 1, has not entered into any joint fundraising agreement to fundraise through Patriot Party, and has no knowledge of Patriot Party's activities, however. To be clear, Donald J. Trump for president has no affiliation with Patriot Party, which is not authorized by Donald Trump or DJTFP. Why am I putting this on the screen? Putting this on the screen, not to say that Donald Trump will never make a Patriot Party, because we're hearing a lot of reports that he will. Putting this on the screen because there are a lot of organizations out there being formed purporting to be Patriot Party and asking for donations, asking for you to sign up and give them your email address, your phone number, your data. And I'm just asking you to, recommending that you be very careful, because there are people out there who claim to be, as they just said, claim to be connected to the president who really aren't, who are really only looking to harvest your data to then sell to other campaigns, sell your email address, right? Sell your phone number, sell your street address so you can get more junk mail. So just be very careful what organizations you sign up for, what organizations you donate to, because they really want to make money and they're willing to lie to do it. So just be very, very careful. Anything else we got to go through? Let me look. This is an interesting one. Put up my screen, Mr. Producer. Democrats move to ban Trump supporters from joining the military or holding federal jobs. That's a crazy one. Stephanie Murphy, representative, her bill would basically say that anyone who ever got involved with the movement that rhymes with drop the peel, or anyone who ever got involved with the movement of Q, Anon, would automatically be barred from ever serving in public office or ever joining the military. So they're trying to purge Trump supporters. Interesting stuff. But that's a real bill. It's a real bill that they want to push through. Anyone who wanted to, I'm not even gonna say the rhyme. It rhymes with drop the peel. Anyone who wanted to be involved with that would automatically be barred from ever joining the military or holding federal office. Pretty interesting stuff. Put up my screen, Mr. Producer. Just want to again show you press briefing by Press Secretary Jen Psaki. 388 people were watching at one moment, but it already had 2,000 downvotes. Oh, that's too funny. Too funny. And before we go, I have one more clip. We'll play this on our way out of Jen Psaki being asked why Joe Biden thought it was xenophobic for Trump to implement a travel ban, but it wasn't xenophobic for him to do the same thing. Let's go ahead and play cut number 1.
When President Trump was imposing travel restrictions in March, specifically on China, then candidate Biden called it xenophobic and fear-mongering. So now President Biden is putting travel restrictions on people coming in from other countries. What word do we use to describe that?
Well, I don't think that's quite a fair articulation. The president has been clear that he felt the Muslim ban was xenophobic. He overturned the Muslim ban. He also, though, has supported, and he himself, even before, or we did, I should say, even before he was inaugurated, steps, travel restrictions in order to keep the American people safe, to ensure that we are getting the pandemic under control. That's been part of his policy. But he was critical of the former president for having a policy that was not more comprehensive than travel restrictions. And he conveyed at the time, and more recently, the importance of having a multifaceted approach, mask wearing, vaccine distribution, funding in order to get 100 million shots in the arms of Americans in the first 100.
All right, cut it. This is propaganda. 100 million shots, 1 million shots a day was already achieved under the Trump administration. It's propaganda. I will say that I love how the Democrats include the sign language interpreting. I don't know a lot of sign language interpreting. I only know a lot of nonsense words. So it is always nice to see that and to expand my vocabulary beyond drunken moose. That's all I know. So hopefully over the next 4 years, I'll learn a little bit more sign language than that. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for notifications on YouTube. Make sure that you like and follow our Facebook page, and go ahead and follow us on DLive as well. We go live Monday through Saturday. This weekend we didn't have one, but Monday through Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you check us out there. Also, make sure you check out the audio version of the podcast. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podbean. If you have a Apple device, make sure you head over there. If you haven't already, leave us a good 5-star review. Help us rise back up in the rankings. Very, very important. We're also on Rumble, rumble.com/user/Conservative Daily. When Parler comes back, we'll be there at Conservative Daily. There's a link if you want to donate. It's in the description. DLive, we're on dlive.tv/Conservative Daily. If you want to get a notification when we go live, text FREEDOM to 89517. You'll receive a text alert, or you can join our email newsletter. Do both. It's not either or. Do both. Email newsletter. That's how we are going to keep you updated if we have to let you know if we get the ban hammer. Also, anyone listening to the audio version, our call-in number 888-441-1121. Leave a message this week, and we'll include it in our Friday show, our Friday Open Line Friday. So make sure you do that. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. Don't know where Joe went. Hopefully he'll be on the show tomorrow. Until then, my name is Max McGuire. Remember that the fight to take back our country clearly isn't over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together.